My husband promised his family my inherited house behind my back, and when I refused to sell, he committed fraud that destroyed everything. My world turned upside down last month over something I never imagined would become an issue in my marriage. I inherited my childhood home when my parents died in a car accident 3 years ago. The accident happened on a rainy night when they were driving back from their anniversary dinner. I was 25 then, living in a small apartment across town, building my career as a marketing executive. The news shattered me completely. The house is all I have left of them now. It's a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial-style home in a quiet suburb where I grew up. My parents bought it when they first got married and spent 30 years making it perfect. My dad was a high school teacher and mom worked as a nurse. They weren't rich, but they were smart with money. They paid off the mortgage 5 years before the accident. I met Kendrick at a friend's birthday party a year after my parents passed. He was charming and understood my grief since he'd lost his father when he was young. He works in sales and has this way of making everyone feel comfortable. We dated for a year, got engaged, and married 6 months ago. Everything was perfect until he started talking about selling my house. It began during dinner last month. We were eating takeout in the kitchen when Kendrick brought up his childhood. He talked about how his family struggled financially, how they never had proper vacations because every penny went to basic needs. His mother worked 2 jobs, and they still barely made ends meet. He said now that we're married, he wants to give his family the experiences they never had. Then he dropped the bomb. He suggested selling my house, buying a smaller place in a different neighborhood, and using the remaining money for an extended family vacation. He had it all planned out, 2 weeks in Europe, staying at nice hotels, visiting multiple countries. His whole family would come, his mother, his 3 sisters, their husbands, and kids. I was stunned. This house isn't just property to me. Every corner holds memories. The kitchen where mom taught me to cook, the backyard where dad built me a treehouse, the living room where we had game nights every Friday. Even the scratches on the hardwood floors tell stories. There's a burn mark on the kitchen counter from when I tried to make pancakes at age 12. The door frame has marks showing how tall I grew each year. When I said no, Kendrick got angry. He said I was being selfish, that marriage means making sacrifices. He talked about making new memories, said holding on to the past wasn't healthy. But this isn't about living in the past. This house is my parents' legacy to me. They worked hard to own it outright so I would always have a home. For the next few weeks, Kendrick wouldn't drop it. Every day he had new reasons why we should sell. The house was too big for 2 people. The property taxes were high. The maintenance costs would add up. We could invest the money better. He even suggested we could use some money for having kids, knowing I want to start a family soon. Last week, I caught him on his laptop looking at real estate websites. He was checking house prices in our area, making calculations. When I confronted him, he claimed he was just doing research to show me the possibilities. The house is worth about $450,000 now, and he kept talking about all the amazing things we could do with that money. I tried explaining again why the house matters. I told him about Sunday dinners on the porch, about mom's rose garden that blooms every spring, about dad spending weekends fixing things around the house. I showed him the family photos on the walls, the Christmas ornaments mom collected, dad's old tools in the garage. But Kendrick just rolled his eyes and said I needed to think about the future instead of clinging to the past. Yesterday, everything exploded. I came home early from work and found him on the phone with a real estate agent. He was discussing potential listing prices and the best time to sell. I stood there listening, my hands shaking with anger. When he saw me, he quickly ended the call. I lost it. I told him the house wasn't his to sell and he needed to stop pushing. He got defensive and said that as my husband, he should have a say in our financial decisions. He claimed he was thinking about our future, about giving his family experiences they never had. But this isn't about finances or experiences. This is about respecting what my parents wanted for me. We had a massive fight. He called me stubborn and selfish, said I was choosing a house over our marriage. I reminded him that he knew about the house and its importance before we got married. He never mentioned wanting to sell it then. In fact, he used to say how lucky we were to have such a beautiful home already paid for. Kendrick stormed out and hasn't come back. He's staying at his parents' house. His family started calling and texting me immediately. His mother said I was being unreasonable, that I was preventing family bonding. His sisters sent messages saying I was selfish for not considering Kendrick's feelings. His youngest sister even said I was disrespecting their family's dreams. I'm sitting in my parents' house now, alone, questioning everything. The house feels emptier without Kendrick, but I can't imagine selling it. Every room holds pieces of my parents. Their coffee mugs are still in the kitchen cabinet. Dad's favorite chair is still in the living room. Mom's gardening tools are still in the shed. Kendrick hasn't been home in 2 days. His clothes are still here, but he only texts to ask if I've changed my mind. His family keeps calling, but I've stopped answering. I never thought my marriage would be tested like this, especially not over something that meant so much to my parents and me. Update 1. These past 2 weeks have been a nightmare. Kendrick came back after 3 days, but things weren't the same. He barely talked to me, spent most time on his phone, and kept taking calls in private. If I walked into the room while he was on the phone, he'd quickly end the call or lower his voice. I thought he was just processing things, giving me the silent treatment, or maybe talking to friends about our situation. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. Last Saturday changed everything. I was at Wilson's grocery picking up some things when I ran into Martha, my mother-in-law's close friend from church. She rushed over excitedly and hugged me, congratulating me on finally doing the right thing. I had no idea what she meant. She went on about how wonderful it was that we were selling the house. She mentioned how Kendrick's mother Susan had told everyone at church about their upcoming family trip to Europe. Martha talked about their planned stays at luxury hotels in Paris and Rome, the private tours they'd booked, and how Susan was already shopping for new luggage. I stood there in the middle of the grocery store, frozen, a can of soup in my hand, as Martha detailed plans I'd never agreed to. She mentioned how they were all proud of me for letting go and putting family first. When she asked which realtor we were using, I mumbled something about being in a hurry and left my half-filled cart in the aisle. I drove home feeling sick. When I got there, Kendrick was on the phone again. He quickly hung up when he saw my face. I confronted him immediately, asking him about the European tours and luxury hotels. He tried denying it at first, said Martha must have misunderstood. But when I kept pushing, he finally broke. He told his entire family we were selling. He admitted he thought if everyone believed it was happening, if they all started making plans, I'd feel pressured to agree. His family had already started booking refundable reservations. His mother had even joined some European travel groups on Facebook. The next day was even worse. Around noon, 3 cars pulled up in front of our house. His entire family piled out, his parents, his 3 sisters, 2 brothers-in-law, and his mom's sisters. 11 people in total. They called it a family intervention. They arranged themselves around my living room, the same room where I'd spent countless evenings watching TV with my own parents. Susan, my mother-in-law, started crying about how they'd never had a real family vacation. She talked about growing up poor, about how she'd always dreamed of seeing Europe. His father Robert mentioned his heart condition, hinting this might be his last chance for a big family trip. His sisters chimed in next. Sarah showed photos of her kids, saying they deserved to see the world. Emma talked about family bonds and making memories together. The youngest, Lisa, suggested that my parents would want me to move on and create new memories. His aunts nodded along, adding comments about how family should come first. I sat there listening to them talk about my house, my inheritance, my parents' legacy like it was their property to claim. When I asked why they couldn't save up for their own trip, the room got quiet. Susan started crying harder. Robert muttered something about living paycheck to paycheck. Through all of this, Kendrick just sat there. He didn't defend me. Didn't stop them. When I looked at him for support, he stared at the floor. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a vacation. He was using his family to manipulate me. I stood up and told them all to leave. I said they had no right to come into my parents' house and try to guilt me into selling it. I pointed out how they all lived in their own homes they'd never consider selling for a vacation. I asked them why my inheritance had to fund their dreams. After they left, Kendrick exploded. He said I'd embarrassed him, made his mother cry, ruined their plans. When I reminded him that he was the one who lied about selling the house, who gave them false hope, he packed another bag and left again. Now he's telling everyone who'll listen that I'm choosing a dead house over a living family. That I'm stuck in the past, refusing to make new memories. Some of our mutual friends have started taking his side. They say maybe I should think about what my husband wants to, about compromising for the sake of family harmony. His family keeps up their campaign. They send me links to European travel sites, photos of places they want to visit, messages about family unity and moving forward. Some messages are getting nasty. His sister Emma texted that I'm tearing the family apart over bricks and mortar. His aunt called me a selfish brat who doesn't deserve Kendrick. I've blocked most of their numbers. Kendrick still hasn't come home. He texts every few days asking if I've come to my senses yet. Each message makes me more certain I'm right to stand my ground. Update 2. Everything I discovered today changed my entire understanding of this situation. I was cleaning our home office, organizing papers and files, when I found a thick manila folder hidden behind some finance books on the top shelf. What I found inside made me physically sick. Kendrick had signed a preliminary agreement with Richardson Real Estate 2 months ago, way before he ever mentioned selling to me. The agreement had details about potential listing prices, commission rates, and preferred showing times. He'd even filled out initial paperwork, leaving spaces blank where my signature would need to go. But that was just the beginning. The folder contained emails between Kendrick and his family spanning the last 3 months. They weren't planning a vacation at all. The real plan was to use the money from my house to start a family business, a chain of Italian restaurants they'd always dreamed about. The vacation story was just a cover, something they thought would be harder for me to refuse. The emails revealed everything. His mother had written that nobody could fault me for not wanting to give a family a vacation. His sister Emma suggested bringing up children and future expenses to pressure me. They had planned every manipulation, every guilt trip, every tear-filled conversation. Reading through the emails made my blood boil. Kendrick had already promised his family they could use the house as collateral for additional business loans. He told them it was almost a done deal, that I just needed a little more convincing. They'd already started meeting with restaurant suppliers, looking at potential locations, and even interviewing chefs. His brother-in-law had created detailed business plans. They needed about $400,000 to start, almost exactly what they'd get from selling my house. They planned to open the first restaurant in 6 months, with 2 more locations within the first year. When I confronted Kendrick over the phone about what I'd found, he finally broke. He admitted everything. His family had always struggled financially. His father's failed business ventures left them in debt. They saw my inheritance as their chance to finally succeed. He claimed he thought once the restaurants were successful, I'd understand and forgive him. I asked him why he couldn't just be honest from the start. His response made me feel sick. He said he knew I'd never agree to sell my house for their business venture. The vacation story was more sympathetic, more likely to get support from friends and family. He thought if enough people pressured me, I'd eventually give in. His family's reaction was worse than his. Instead of apologizing for the deception, they doubled down. His mother called crying, saying family should help family. His father claimed they would have made me a partner in the business, given me a share of the profits. They acted like I was being unreasonable for being upset about their lies. Then I learned they'd already spread word about their upcoming restaurant chain to their extended family and friends. People had been congratulating them, asking about job opportunities, offering to invest small amounts. Now they were all angry at me for ruining their plans. Kendrick's cousin Amy sent me a long message about how I didn't understand their family's struggles. She detailed how they'd lived on food stamps, how his parents still rent their house, how this business was their one shot at a better life. She said I was being cruel by holding on to a house while denying them their dreams. The depth of betrayal is staggering. This wasn't just about selling a house anymore. They'd been plotting for months, making plans with my inheritance, treating my parents' home like their personal asset. All while pretending to care about family memories and European vacations. I've already changed all the locks and installed security cameras. I don't trust Kendrick or his family not to try something desperate now that their plan is exposed. I have a meeting with a lawyer tomorrow to protect myself and my property. I'm taking all the evidence I found, the real estate agreement, the emails, everything. Kendrick keeps calling, leaving messages about how I'm misunderstanding everything, how they had good intentions. His family has started a smear campaign, telling everyone I'm destroying their dreams out of spite. But the evidence is clear. They never cared about my feelings or my parents' legacy. They just saw an opportunity to use me. Update 3. I'll get straight to the point, I'm getting divorced. The events of these 3 months showed me exactly who Kendrick and his family really are, and it's worse than I imagined. After discovering their restaurant scheme, Kendrick tried one final desperate move. He actually forged my signature on house sale documents. He found an eager real estate agent from a different firm than Richardson Real Estate, probably because Richardson had refused to proceed without meeting me in person. The new agent, Sandra, contacted me to verify some details about the closing date. When I told her I never agreed to sell, she was horrified. She emailed me all the paperwork, showing multiple documents with my forged signatures. Kendrick had even faked my signature on a power of attorney document. I took everything straight to my lawyer. We filed for divorce the next day and pressed criminal charges for attempted fraud. Kendrick was arrested at his parents' house. His family quickly bailed him out, still defending him. His mother actually told people he did it because I'd forced him to take desperate measures by being selfish. The story spread through our social circles like wildfire. People who'd sided with Kendrick started backing away when they learned about the forgery. His cousin Amy, who'd called me cruel, sent a long apology email. She admitted the whole family had known about the business plan from the beginning, and she felt guilty for trying to manipulate me. Kendrick's family made one final attempt to get the house. They somehow secured a loan and offered to buy it themselves at market value. When I refused, they started a harassment campaign. They'd drive by at night, taking photos of the house. They posted on social media about how empty and unused it looked, claiming I was selfishly wasting a valuable property that could help the whole family. I got a restraining order against all of them. The divorce proceedings are moving quickly. Turns out attempted fraud makes things much simpler. My lawyer says it's one of the clearest cases she's handled. I'm keeping the house and everything else I inherited. Kendrick's getting nothing except legal troubles. The family's restaurant dreams imploded spectacularly. They'd already spent money they didn't have, expecting to get it from my house sale. They'd put deposits on restaurant equipment and even hired a chef to start developing recipes. Now they're facing their own financial mess and blaming me for it. I'm still in my childhood home, and now I appreciate it even more. Every room reminds me of my parents' hard work and love. Some people, including my aunt, suggested I consider forgiving Kendrick, saying his family pressured him. But I can't forget how he plotted for months to steal my inheritance, forged my signature, and betrayed my trust completely. The divorce should be final in 2 months. I've cut contact with everyone who tried to defend Kendrick's actions. His family still badmouths me to anyone who'll listen, but most people now know the truth. They showed their true colors, people who'd lie, manipulate, commit fraud, and then play the victim when caught. The house is more than just walls and rooms to me. It's my parents' legacy, their gift to me, and I protected it from people who tried to steal it through manipulation and fraud. I don't regret standing my ground, and I never will.